you know, it's fine as it is, but just to help myself a little bit, I'll rotate it, just sort of line it up. And there we have it. That's pretty good. So we didn't solve many points on Isaac because we didn't want the camera to consider them when solving it, because they could be moving, such as these fingertips and things like that. So what we can now do is come in here, Shift F3 to create a user feature, and we can select different parts of Isaac that we want to track. And so for instance, we would probably want one on the elbow, one on his very tip, the fingertip. Same for here as well. I think I had one for each eye and one for his mouth. So what we'll do, I'll just do one for his eye here. So we create it, and I'll just go to the track listing here. I'll take off all, and we just go forward in time, tracking that. Okay, and then once that's done, we just right click and we solve this. Solves it into the scene. It has a bit of error, but that's okay. In fact, this one has a lot of error, but we'll get the general position of where it needs to be. It's been solved into the shot. The more accurate the track is, of course the more accurate the solve, the better it will solve into the scene. But this will do for now. We just right click and rename this one. This will be his right eye, and just repeat the process for each part. So 2 eyes, mouth, elbow, fingertip, and we've got plenty of points for his feet and things like that, so that should be alright. Then you just come over here, new export, and I'll be working in Maya, and so that's good. And we need to tag these features first, so right click, tag for export. That's tagged, and I just want to export the tagged, not all features, just tag, because we've got quite a lot of other features here that I don't need. And the model of the skeleton that I have is a sort of stock model, so I can't legally give that to you guys in the project files. I have searched TurboSquid for skeletons and things like that, and there are some that you could definitely use instead of the one that I'm going to be using. So just once you've got the scene, import your skeleton, and I will be giving you guys this match move file if you don't want to match move the footage yourself. Here I've gone and imported the skeleton, and we can see that his size is just far too big. It's modeled at a different scale to what this is, so we can just go into the perspective view here and see that's the sort of the size of Isaac's arm span there, and this is the size of our skeleton. Definitely a different scale. So let's just grab the skeleton and scale him down. R to use the scale tool, and scale him right down to about the size of Isaac. Now we can move him into place roughly, and a good idea is to have all the different views open so that we can line it up. We can see that the ground plane lines up correctly already. In the top view we can work out sort of his general rotation that we need, something like that, and we can sort of move him. Whoops, it's a bit hard to see the actual moving, the movement controls here. Sort of move him into where he needs to be. And we can see that these points are, these were tracked on Isaac's shirt. So these, we can see they're not really lining up, they're too far back, sorry, they're too far forward. The skeleton is too far back. We could sort of attribute a little bit of that to the fact that this is a skeleton, it doesn't have any muscle, skin and clothes, which would sort of buffer his chest out a little bit, but still they are quite a bit too far forward, and we can see that the elbows completely don't line up. So let's go back into the camera view and just get a sense for what's going on. You can see it's a bit tall, it's in generally it's in a pretty alright position, and let's just scrub through. Also a good time to check your match move here. If you weren't sure whether you wanted to use whether your match move was accurate enough, would be a good time to definitely do a play blast and see whether it looks good or not. So window play blast, and you can use the play blast options, time slider, view, about 70% quality, and scale of half is good. I'll just run through there. Okay, and we can see that I'm actually pretty happy with this. There is some slight errors, inaccuracies, which in the final result were actually highlighted by the fact that it was stabilized, but it looks pretty good, and certainly is pretty much as good as I can do, so I can't really make it any better. I'm sure if you're a 3D match move artist, you'll do a better job. So now let's continue lining this up. So I'll go into the perspective view and sort of see my camera's pivot point is sort of wacky. I can just go to the outliner, click on my skeleton and hit F, and that'll change the origin of the camera and zoom into him. So let's first of all work out scale, because if the scale's not right, then it's just not going to match up. So in the camera view, I'm going to scale this to an appropriate size. Now we can see that the proportions of this skeleton are actually different to Isaac. I think that the character's head, sorry, the skull is currently in a pretty good position, but in doing so, the shoulders are far too low. The shoulders are actually, terribly low, much lower than Isaac's shoulders. So this skeleton, whether it's modeled inaccurate or Isaac has odd proportions, I'm willing to bet that it's actually the 3D model that's the problem here. It's not going to line up. What's really important is that these shoulders do line up. So I'm actually going to scale them with the shoulder blades in mind. Come through and see, yep, that's looking pretty good. And now we can see, now we can deal with the fact that the skull is way too high. I mean, Isaac has pretty puffy hair, but that skull, way too high. So I'm going to cheat it. I'm just going to move this skull down. So the character technically doesn't really have a neck, but this is going to look better. You're not really going to notice that the skeleton doesn't have a neck. His head, you would definitely notice if his head was a few inches too tall. So we're going to go with this. The scale, I'm pretty happy with the scale. Now let's sort of use the points that we have to sort of line up the character a bit better in the perspective view. Now these points here were one on each eye, and I believe his mouth or his nose. So let's actually try and get this skeleton's face to be a bit closer to these. And this one here is where his chest is, and this is where his pants are. So I don't expect that, I'm not going to push this all the way forward until they line up, because I suspect that will be too far forwards. So in the outline, grab the skeleton, and we can see that it's kind of an awkward pivot at the moment. Z is that way, X is this way. We might be able to change that if you double click into the move options and go object, and there we have a bit more appropriate movement axes. So I'm going to move the skeleton a bit closer to the points, and let's see how far, if I move this so far as for all of them to line up. So we can now see that the eyes line up and the chest is almost there. The pelvis is pretty much touching. I suspect that that's moved it a little bit too far forward. That actually looks pretty good. I can see that we pretty much need to work it out one bit at a time, because otherwise we're going to get overwhelmed. Let's try and get these legs to line up. Actually, that would be stupid. Let's get the overall rotation of the character working. So the legs are attached to the pelvis, the arms attached to the rib cage, or the chest. So let's get both the pelvis and the chest rotated into the correct direction, so that we can work on the other parts. It looks pretty good for now. We can sort of see that the chest is pointing is actually too far forwards at this point here, and isn't far back enough on this side. And if we go to here, it's actually lining up pretty good. So what I'm going to do is move him back ever so slightly in the perspective view. Outline our skeleton, move you back just a little bit. Now let's work on the rotation, but just before we do that, let's check at the start. It's sort of looking a little better. I think one reason this is so far forward, this is so far back, is the actual rotation is probably a little bit off. So we can just grab the skeleton, sort of angle him a little bit, and then maybe move him like that. Unfortunately, we can see that the skull has come off. So be very careful when aligning. So I'm pretty happy with the general gist of that rotation. Let's work out these legs here, and if we go into the skeleton, sort of want to work at one leg at a time. This leg here sort of needs to go back a bit, and maybe in a little, something like that. And the foot itself doesn't look right at this point. So I was working on the left leg. I want to come just a little bit, and I'll go down into this hierarchy and find the actual, under the knee, I should have the foot. And have that sort of pointing a little more the way we want it. Now, let me scrub through and see. Well, the legs actually go off screen, but at the very last point in time that we see the legs, we can see that's looking pretty good. As far as realism go, I don't think Isaac is actually pushing his leg back that far. I think that's actually a bit inaccurate, but if it looks good, then it is good. So we're not going for realism, we're just going for what looks good. And let's work on this leg now. In the outliner, let's grab the right leg, and let's move it back. So we can see that the pivot is actually inverted on this one. So just hit Z was the to undo, and then actually push it back in the way it wants to go. We can see things are going opposite in every direction on this one. So sort of lining that up, and then I'll come into the right foot and align that. And that's looking very good. Now let's have a go at these arms here. So, because I have these locators here to help me be more accurate, I'm going to make use of them in the perspective view. So this arm here, let's go into the outliner and find his left arm, and I need to position it like that so that they meet up, and then go into the left arm, grab the forearm, and we can see that that's actually physically impossible to do, but if it lines up, then I'm totally fine to do that. It's probably an inaccuracy to do with where PFTrack solved this in Z space, so I may push it back a little bit more, because if the audience notices that the guy's got his arm in an impossible location, it might look a bit odd. So let's go back to the camera view here. It looks alright. Now, one odd thing that I found is that his elbow meets up, was just way too far forward. It sort of looks like, if we just hide the skeleton, that his elbow should sort of be here, but if we can see that it's all the way over here. So this could be, again, something to do with the proportions. What I might do is just scale down the left arm to sort of help it match a bit better. And also what I'll need to do is angle it up, because otherwise it's not going to match. And then I'll get to the forearm with that one down. And then I might grab the hand itself and sort of angle it down like that. Let's go through. it's looking okay. It seems I've made it just a bit too small now when I was scaling.